the excuse that you hear a lot is, well, if I'm wrong, what's the worst that can happen? If I die and there's no heaven, I lived a good life. Well, but if I'm right, then hey, I escaped hell. It's like eternal life insurance. But I want to say this, that is so, so, so wrong and harmful. The consequences are so massive to you and your family and the human race.
Scott, thank you so much for joining me on this podcast. Thank you so much for, in advance for telling me kind of your life story and your experiences and answering the ample questions I'm already sure I'm going to have for you. But just kind of in order to get started, if you would like, I'd love to hear just more about who you are, what you're about, interesting facts about yourself, and then feel free to kind of introduce what you're going to talk to us about today.
Okay. So my name's Scott Newton. Career-wise right now, I guess I'll start with that. I'm a small business entrepreneur and property investor, along with my wife. Her name is Jetta. She's from Argentina. Shout out, babe. This is my, hey mom, I'm on TV moment. So love you. So that's pretty much, in a nutshell, that's what I'm doing right now. As far as where I come from, that's a story and a half. I feel like I should be like that old pirate on the rocking chair with a pipe. So you want to hear me tell? It's a weird one. I gave up a long time ago trying to make it work in a nutshell, or, the easiest question for most people is, where are you from? And that is about a 2-hour story. I grew up in what I would classify as a cult, independent fundamental Baptist, which we'll get into some of the specifics of that. I do tell people that I'm a survivor of 3 cults. I went from one to the next to the next. So independent fundamental Baptist to a cult that doesn't really have a name, and it's very particular, but I just call it the worldwide evangelism cult. And again, we'll get into some of those details. And I finally ended up at the end of the road in 5-point Calvinism.
Wow.
So, yeah. Oh yeah. It was a trip.
Wow. So just to kind of give listeners a little bit of background, we've never met before. This is our first time speaking. I found you because for my podcast, I like to do research, and on Facebook, I searched the word cult. And whenever
you can just admit you were stalking me. It's okay.
I was. No, I searched the word cult, and whenever you search something on Facebook, you can filter it through groups, through people, through accounts, and I filtered it through posts. And you had made what I felt was a very poignant post on your experiences being, recruited, I suppose, into multiple cults. And so I immediately was interested, and I reached out to you to be on this podcast. And so how does one go about getting in the first cult, let alone a string of cults? What's the story there?
Very good question. So in my experience with cults that I've been in and around, which is quite a bit, the vast majority of people are not really willing participants in the full sense of the word. They're born into it in some way or another. And I think that's something that people, I hope that your audience knows this and holds on to this, that there needs to be definitely an element of grace, when you're hearing these kinds of stories and you're encountering people who are very ideological, very just driven into whatever their particular mindset is. Have some grace, because humans are extremely influenceable, malleable, especially when you're young. So for me, I was born into it. I was actually born in what people call the Mecca of independent fundamental Baptist world, which is Greenville, South Carolina. Again, not Greenville. If you're from there, it's Greenville.
No, Greenville,
South Carolina. home of Bob Jones University, which
Oh,
you've probably heard of.
yes.
Okay, my dad went there. He's an
Okay.
alumnus of Bob Jones University. So that was the world I was born into. Um, and I'll get into a little bit more in detail later, just how systematic and effective these strategies are. And I don't even want to call them strategies. I'm not sure, but these tactics, let's say, these tactics. And a lot of them are well-intentioned.
Yes.
It's cumulative. It's generational. It's, in a sense, it's sins of the father, and we're all in that position, I think, to one extent or the other. We all have our programming. It's epigenetic evolution is what it is. We're picking up from the previous generation, some of it good, some of it bad. And hopefully we're evolving still, and we're pushing past some of that stuff, but it's a long process. So, that was a difficult thing for me, even to be able to open up and talk about these kind of things with other people, much less come on a podcast and do it, because there's a lot of personal shame that goes into it. You go, man, how could I have been so stupid? How could I
Yes.
have been so wrong?
Right. It's just like any abusive relationship.
Yes.
Everybody's like, why didn't you leave? How did you not see the signs? Why did you stay so long? Yada, yada, yada.
You
And
don't understand.
there's so many layers to especially in religion, because religions, primarily Christian denominations, they build such a family vibe that you feel like if you are having doubts, or if you're unhappy, or if you want to leave, you are against the family and you want to leave the family.
And those voices are satanic.
Yes. And
so
that's the other.
I was talking with someone the other day about this, that they didn't realize that one of those tactics I mentioned is that from a very, very early age, you are taught to demonize your own conscience.
Yes.
That when
100%.
Right, you embrace cognitive dissonance from the earliest possible age, that you identify that voice that is telling you whatever it's telling you, this is off, this is wrong, this is scary, this is abusive, something doesn't seem right. And you are taught to, there's even a Bible verse for it. You're taking every thought captive to the knowledge of Christ. It is the devil who is tempting your faith, who is trying to pull you away from the truth. And if that's the only thing that you've ever known, boy, yeah, it's a job and a half to get out.
Yes. And I was telling my previous guest that exact same thing, that you are not only told that this religion is the correct way and the only way, but you're also pre-told that should you ever have questions or doubts, that's the devil speaking to your mind. So of course, when you get older and you start thinking and you start like critically kind of analyzing whether or not you believe what you're being told, your brain automatically goes to, this is what they always warned me about.
You have neural pathways. That's a physiological thing that is actually, it's grooves in your gray matter. It's there, and so people don't realize that. They're not taught that. And the other thing is human nature that again, hopefully is something one day will evolve past to some extent, is we have a very, very dangerous proclivity to identify and form our sense of self and ego around our thoughts and beliefs. Yes. So it's very hard to separate those. And that's not just for cults. That's not just for religious people.
No.
Humans.
Yes.
So
absolutely.
When something is attacked or brought into doubt or question, it feels like you're being attacked.
Absolutely. And I spoke to somebody about this earlier this week. Religion is one, I feel like religion and politics are the two categories in which, when you are asked a question that needs a difficult answer, you feel you're being attacked.
Yeah.
I feel like in politics and religion, and in America, I feel like those two things are very intertwined anyway, but it's two of the only categories of thought I've ever seen where, in order to ask someone a question, you're basically attacking them.
Yep. And it's not what party do you vote for? It's what are you? Are you a Republican? Are you a Democrat? Are you a Christian? It's ego, it's self. I think that people try to find their identity, who they actually are, in way too many things.
Yes.
Even down to things like gender, sexuality, race. All of those are nothing to be ashamed of, and they're fantastic. And yeah, they make up a part of your human experience, but it's not your essence. It's not who you are.
Right. Exactly. Humans are pack animals.
Yes.
We want to belong. We want to be included. We'll even change a few things about ourselves in order to fit in better. And the very same way that sororities and fraternities are like, hey, your family is far away, be a part of our family. The same way that gangs are like, you don't have anyone else to protect you. We will protect you.
Absolutely.
Religion is the same way. They're like, hey, you're lost, you're wandering. We want to guide you in the right direction. Join our family, join our group.
The pull of community is so strong.
Right. And I'm not saying that to say that a sorority is a gang and a cult. I'm not saying that to say that like Greek life is a gang and a cult, but there is a similarity in the groups that we join, whether it's our religious affiliation, whether it's our political affiliation, whether it's our Greek affiliation. It's all to belong and to fit in and to feel protected and to feel safe. Yes. And like you mentioned earlier, a lot of these religions come from a good place. They're not out here to, they don't think that they're out here to get you. They truly think they are doing you a favor by keeping you from burning in hell or whatever that particular religion thinks the worst thing that could happen to you is.
100%. A lot of it is well-intentioned.
Yes.
The majority of it is well-intentioned. And yeah, to your point of community, we'll get into details about I call them IFB for short, Independent Fundamental Baptist. One of the major places that they could get new converts that they don't breed within the church has historically been the military for exactly the reasons that you said.
Yep. And the military is another one of those groups. They get you and they recruit you and you're part of a brotherhood and
they give you a new identity.
They do.
I was in the Navy. When I came out of the Navy, it was a tough transition because it had been drilled into me. This is who you are. You are a United States sailor. Yep. And well, if I'm not that anymore, and that is, again, that's human growth. It's a constant, it's not a one-time thing. It's a constant death and rebirth of ego.
Yes. And that's a really good way to put it.
Whenever you stop and you stagnate and you say, I'm done, this is who I am, this is who I'm always going to be, this is what I'm always going to believe, this is what I'm always going to think, I've got the answers, that's when you're dangerous. You're not just dangerous to yourself, you're dangerous to the world.
Yes, absolutely. I've always said this. I don't like to trust people who are absolutists. If somebody always has the answer, always knows this, always knows that. And that was one of the things that first got my attention in Sunday school was there was always an answer. Even when that answer didn't really make a lot of sense, even when the answer didn't actually answer what I had asked,
right.
There was always just this big flowery answer, as opposed to, I don't know, that's a great question. Why don't we look into that together and learn?
People are scared to death of doubt, and doubt is not our enemy. Doubt is, I call myself a believing agnostic, and I absolutely believe this. And this is also to answer kind of a thing that I'm really hoping that in this podcast, I'm hoping that there's someone listening who's going through similar things that I went through. And I know the fear that they have. They have the fear that there is no God outside of this fence. There is no divine. There is no sense of purpose. There is no joy. There is no grace. There is no life. There's no community. Right. It's just a barren wilderness. That's what you're taught to expect. There's nothing out there for you. And so when I say I'm a believing agnostic, what I mean is that, agnosticism comes from the Greek of without knowledge. So the lack of knowledge in the presence of doubt is not a bad thing. It's not a scary thing. It's an extremely good thing. There's no science, there's no learning, there's no growth without a lack of knowledge. That's what science is. It is saying, hey, we were wrong about something and we found something else out.
Yes.
And I say believing agnostic because, look, just because I don't have all the answers, that doesn't mean that I believe in absolutely nothing. And I think that faith can't exist without doubt. I think faith without doubt is tyranny. It's absolute mental, emotional, spiritual tyranny. If you have no questions whatsoever, no doubts whatsoever, you're not going to grow. You're not going to push. You're not going to become who you should be. And that is not just a personal thing. That's to the detriment of the entire human race, and more specifically and directly to the people who you love around you. Like, life is a blessing, it's a gift, but it's also a responsibility. And when you don't stand up to that and live up to that and say, I'm going to, no matter how hard the question is, no matter how scary it is, okay, I don't know what happens when I die. I don't. Does that scare me? Yeah, on some level it does. I think everyone, if we're honest about it, come on, it's the unknown. What's going to happen? Is anything going to happen? But I think faith is saying, in the absence of knowledge, I still somehow believe that there's something.
Yes.
Still believe that there's something with meaning and purpose. And everyone's going to define that differently and live that differently. But it's not the absence of faith.
Right. Right. And I think that's a point that gets missed a lot. I think that's a really great point. And I think on both sides that gets missed. I think on the religious side, they're like, no, that's not real faith. And right. On the non-religious side, they're like, whatever, that's like, that sounds like a bunch of excuses, you know? Right. How old were you when you started with IFB? Was that something you were born and raised into? Was that something your dad, his belief system got you involved in? How did that start?
Yeah, so I was born into it. My dad came from a Southern Baptist background. My grandfather was a Southern Baptist church planter, actually, up in Alaska. So I actually became a third generation Baptist church planter.
What is that for people who don't know? What's a church planter?
Yeah, sorry. So a church planter is someone who starts a new church from scratch.
Got it. And then you just so you plant the seed, and then once it's kind of established on its own, you move on to somewhere else?
Typically that's how it happens. Yeah. And a lot of times they're called missionaries. Got
it.
So my grandfather was a Southern Baptist missionary, if you will, planting a church in Alaska. My dad grew up that way. And my dad, who was also no longer part of IFB, he kind of went his own way for a while, and ended up, like I was telling you before about the military, ended up stationed in the Air Force in North Islands, Portugal. So specifically for servicemen, this plant there. And, like I said, I think most people, especially with cults like IFB, you're either going to breed them, the participants, or you're going to get them at a vulnerable time. And you're going to give them exactly what you talked about: community, sense of belonging, sense of purpose, those kind of things. And that is, to my understanding, pretty much what happened. There was a dynamic, charismatic authority figure, getting them excited about the Bible, getting them excited about this worldview. And he was a newlywed, had just married my mom, and ended up, long story short, I want to be careful here too, because I have differences with my dad about religion. We have a great relationship. He is a fantastic person, and I respect him. I respect his beliefs. But what I'm going to tell you is kind of my perspective, and it wouldn't necessarily be the way that he would describe it.
Yeah.
So I'll just say it
absolutely.
that way.
Yeah. Everybody, I feel like two people can have the exact same event happen to them and experience two different things, and neither one of them are incorrect about their experience.
Exactly. And so what I'll say is, he felt at the time like God was calling him to return to the Azores as a missionary, to bring that same message to the people in the Azores and Portugal who had never heard it, and of course were going to die and go to hell because they never heard the gospel. So he went back to the States, went to Bob Jones University, got his degree, and then did something in the IFB, which is a little bit unique. It's not the way that most churches spread and plant and do missions, but independent fundamental Baptists are, in a sense, independent. They believe in the autonomy of the local church. It's one of their big beefs with the Southern Baptist Convention. Why they came out from there, actually, was because they don't think that there should be a convention or a board or anyone else telling any particular church what it should do with its finances, its missions, its doctrine. So each individual, from my perspective, it's thousands of individual little cults, and they all share a lot of things in common, but they all think that they're very unique.
And nobody is checking any of them, because their whole thing is that nobody should be allowed to check any of them.
Yes. And so what happens is the abuse, and there is a lot of abuse, a lot of sexual abuse with kids and molestation and really ugly things. And when these things happen, and in fact, that's exactly what happened with that church planter who was there. Ended up, he was having affairs with 20 women on the island and all this kinds of crazy stuff that came out.
That's like, isn't that like the whole island? How many people were on this island?
Not that many.
I was going to say.
It's a good percentage.
Wow.
Yeah, but that kind of stuff just runs rampant because they get kicked out, they go on to the next one. And as long as they say the right things and, I'm in the club and, that's it.
And all they have to say is, I started this many churches. They don't have to say I was kicked out of this many churches or I was removed from this many churches. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep.
And so what was it that caused you, or was it you and your family, to then leave IFB and leave the religion that you had grown up in, and then get involved in an entirely different sect, like an entirely different cult? Like, how did that, was that later on in life? Was that your whole family? Was that just you?
That's a good question. For me, it was, and the next one we'll go to is the World Evangelism cult. That was essentially a cult within a cult. It's the subsection of the IFB thing. If you don't mind, would it be okay if I kind of gave you a little bit more background about what IFB is? And because that's transition into that change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because it's a crazy story. So IFB, I like to label it. I put little labels on my notes for the three cults. My label for IFB is Jesus loves you, but I'm his favorite. Oh. And basically it's, imagine, if you want to know what IFB is, imagine that the Southern Baptists have a one-night stand with the Amish and have angry, unprotected sex. That's pretty much
so it. An average Thursday at Bama is what you're saying. Yeah. like your average weeknight at Auburn.
Pretty much, yes, exactly, yeah. So that's it. I mean, I grew up believing Southern Baptists were the liberals. They were the loose ones. They were the ones.
Isn't that wild?
Oh, I hear
Southern Baptists
all the time,
being the liberals.
Oh, they were maybe saved, maybe Christian, but Jesus is not real happy with them because the women wear pants. They listen to rock music. They go to the movie theater. They're not big on, this was the word in IFB, separation. They're not separate from the world. Love not the world, neither the things of the world. So if you are like the world in any way, that's of the devil, right?
That's bananas.
Oh, it was bananas. And most people listening to this probably will have no concept of what IFB is. But I'll say this, if you live in Greenville, South Carolina, I guarantee you've run into them. Yes. If you live in Hammond, Indiana, Lancaster, California, Pensacola, Florida, these are where all of their big training centers, their universities are.
Yeah. And even if even if they've still never heard of them, if they grew up Southern Baptist and you said that Southern Baptists were the liberals, they're going, what? We
were pretty much convinced most of you were going to hell. We wouldn't say it.
Wild.
Oh yeah, we wouldn't say it because technically you still believe the gospel, but you know, where's the fruit? You know, where's the fruit if you're real?
We don't have fruit, we have casserole. That's what Baptists
have. Really have casserole.
Yeah.
And shame. Casserole and shame.
That too.
Yeah. So the roots of IFB is very much biblical literalism. So it was taking it a step even further from Southern Baptist. It is, hey, the Bible is inerrant, infallible, inspired, plenary, meaning it is absolutely stand on its own full, has all of the answers to any possible question that life could ever throw at you. And it's very cultish in the sense that you've got near absolute authority from the leaders. Very tight-knit community, pressuring to conform, rewarding conforming. So anytime that you do anything that fits that mold, then yes, you are a mature Christian. You're a good one. We're going to front and center you. You're going to come up behind the pulpit and you're going to get honor and, all this kind of stuff. You're going to be in the church bulletin, So
fundamentalist of the fundamentalists, like as fundamentalist as you can get.
Yeah. And I used to say, it's kind of like no fun, all damn, and very little mental.
We put the fun in fundamental. And then we take it away because it's of Satan. So
right. Yeah, that was not for you. They're very divide and conquer, just like any other cult. So big on separation, especially from family, friends, influencing figures who are not in the group. Spend time with IFB people. And basically, I was taught to look at anyone else who's not in your circle is the mission field. They are someone to convert. You can spend time with them if it is for the purpose of converting them. If not, then you're just a friend of the world. So huge, strong emphasis on molding children very young. Do you remember the show DuckTales?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, you're kind of, I think we're the same generation.
Yeah.
So I grew up watching DuckTales.
Yep.
But just to give you an idea of my background, I only know to this day, this much of the DuckTales intro song. Life is like a hurricane. That's all I know. Because afterwards I had to mute it.
Oh,
because that was rock music.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting. I'm kind of surprised you were even allowed to watch that. Were you doing it like against the rules? Were you doing it?
Well, that's the thing. Everyone stuck in there is, and again, most of it unknowingly, but there's so much inevitable hypocrisy. You cannot have that strict of a worldview, and it just doesn't, you can't do it.
It's not sustainable. It's just not sustainable.
So I like to tell people it's kind of funny. Like, I grew up on an island in the Azores that was 5 miles wide and 50 miles long. And we had 2 TV stations when, the power wasn't out, which it usually was. I had a crazy childhood. I rode donkeys the whole 9 yards. So where was I going with that? Oh yeah, the TV. So, when things would come on, that's what there was. Yeah. And there's nothing else to do. And, so people are going to watch. And I watched Baywatch as a kid. I wasn't allowed to listen to, DuckTales theme song, but I could watch Pamela Anderson's boobs bouncing up and down on the sand. That was fine.
At what point in your, so first of all, how many years were you involved in that particular IFB?
Yeah. So I, again, grew up in it. I went to the Azores as a missionary kid, which is a whole nother thing. Another little bizarre subculture within another subculture, when I was 5 years old. And I got out when I was 17 and joined the military. Yep. And that whole time, basically, my worldview is there's 3 circles. There's the lost, which is 90% of the people in the world.
The Southern Baptists.
Well, you're the second circle.
Oh,
the second circle, yeah. Hey, you're not in the outer extremes of Dante's Inferno. Yeah, you don't want to be there. But there was the second circle of, probably Christian, but don't spend too much time with them. And then there's this tiny little circle of these are the pure ones. This is what God really loves.
Wow.
And if you want to, can I just give a brief synopsis of kind of the doctrine?
Yeah, well, anything you got, I'm here for it. You tell me.
Okay, so I want to get this out because it's a thread that works its way through all three of these cults, and I think this is what a lot of listeners are going to identify with, because this is pretty much the gospel. Okay, so basically, it is there is something desperately evil and wrong with you. You inherited that from Adam. Wasn't your fault, but you got it. And because of that, you deserve the worst possible form of punishment even imaginable. You deserve to be tormented and roasted in hellfire for all of eternity, which, side note, is not even in the Bible. It's not even biblical. It comes from medieval theology, but we've all accepted it as gospel truth, right? And God's the opposite, right? He has no choice but to punish you because he's so holy and perfect. But in his love and mercy, he takes the punishment on himself on the cross, and he gives you his righteousness. So it's this from a very early stage. It is self-hatred. It is self-hatred. You are so fucked up. It's unbelievable.
You're born in debt already.
Yes, you're born in debt. You're born in debt. And it's a debt you can never pay. You can never get rid of it. All you can do is keep accumulating. It's all you can do. And the other really messed up psychological thing in it is it's teaching kids as early as humanly possible to have an outward locus of identity. It's your identity is messed up, so you need something outside yourself to identify with. And if you can get that seed in somebody, they may not stay in the same group, but they're going to, until they really have a serious come to Jesus moment in their life through some trauma or something, that is pernicious. And it's
good word.
Thank you. I'm a nerd. I grew up on an island with candlelight and books and no electronics. So yeah.
I was going to say, like, if people don't expect rednecks to say pernicious.
Pernicious. That actually sounds like my cousin.
I was going to say that sounds pernicious. Like a cousin. Yep. So were you, you said you were involved from 5 to 17. Were you a believer that whole time? Or by the time you were 17, were you starting to question things? How devout were you during that period?
That's a great question. So that brings me into something I wanted to talk about as well, which is everyone in that circle. Absolutely everybody without exception, except for maybe a very, very small percent of literal psychopaths. Because, hey, human population, we have a running 2 to 3% that are going to be psychopathic. There's nothing to do about that. That's why we have society and jails. But outside of those, everyone else in that circle, they all have the same problem. They are scared to death that they're a fake, that they're a hypocrite, that they're not real. And everyone's faking for everyone around them and just dying inside. I remember I would wake up in cold sweats as a child. I remember very, very clearly one night I was 9 years old. And of course, I, being a good little Fundie, I placed my personal belief and faith in Jesus Christ as my personal savior at 4 years old. IFB says they don't believe in infant baptism. They dunked me anyway. But yeah, I said my little prayer, so I was saved. I was good.
Yes.
But then, I mean, 9 years old, I woke up and middle of the night, I remember very clearly, and just terrified. I knew I'm going to get hit by a bus. Something's going to happen to me. And I know that this conversion thing that everyone talks about, this new birth, this regeneration, it must not have happened to me because I'm still me. I still have all the same things as before. And this is the paradox that they all live with, is they're sold this bill of goods that we give you the bad news and we tell you you've got inoperable cancer. And then we tell you, oh, hey, we took it away. And then whatever symptoms you had before, which weren't cancer, you still have them because nothing really happened.
Right.
And then you're going, shit, I've got cancer still.
Yeah. You're like, why do I not feel any better? Why is this not working?
Yep, I still cough every now and then.
Yeah, right? Yeah. And I think I don't know what it was like within IFB, but I know that within at least the Baptist branch of Christianity, what was always very confusing was this idea that when you're saved, you're saved. You cannot be
Right.
unsaved. Nobody can take that away from you. You are a lamb of God. But at the same time, you are still supposed to ask forgiveness all the time. You're still supposed to avoid
Right.
all the bad things the Bible tells you not to do. And it's very confusing because what I now know the words for it as an adult, but as a kid, you're like, you don't know.
Sanctification.
Say what?
Progressive sanctification.
Well, and like,
That's what they,
as a kid, you come to understand that love is conditional then. Because if God is your father,
right.
and you're told that once you're saved, you can't be unsaved, but at the same time, you still need to keep asking forgiveness. You still need to pay penance for your sins. You still need to, does that mean that he can lose love for me even though I'm not unsaved?
And it goes a step further. That's absolutely true. And there's another logical conclusion to that, which, and we'll get into this with Calvinism, but it's the same thing in a different format in all of Christianity, which is if you are truly born again and converted, yes, you will struggle with sin, but you will win. You will progressively be sanctified and better and better. It goes up and up and up and up. And if that doesn't happen, that means you're a fake.
Yes.
And the Bible is very, very clear about that. That means First Peter says that you are a false prophet and your end is worse than your beginning. You're Judas. The hottest spot in hell is reserved for you. And so it's a horrible hamster wheel to be on, because you're going, I was supposed to have this conversion thing and I'm not seeing it happen. And so what do people do? They double down. They push that down, and most of it honestly revolves around sexuality.
Yes.
Most of it is, and that's why being a teenager as a Christian is the toughest thing in the world, because I'm being flooded with hormones. All of a sudden I'm seeing boobs and butts everywhere, and I don't
Baywatch.
Right, Baywatch, yes. And I don't know what to do with this, and I'm not supposed to feel this way.
Right. And like your body
or
is doing
God
things.
help you if you're gay. God help you if you're gay.
Yes. And like, it's very interesting because your body is literally doing things involuntarily. There is nothing you can do about it. The body that you're told God created in his image. Is doing things that you don't want it to do, but it won't stop doing. And you are already in debt to be forgiven for those things that you don't even want happening.
And if you don't somehow find a way to stop physiology, then that confirms that you're a hypocrite and you're going to burn forever. Yes. I mean, you want to talk about torture and emotional manipulation and abuse.
Yep.
It's horrible. So those were my teenage years.
Wow.
Was just, I am tortured. I am terrible. And I was convinced. I never got to the point as a teenager where I was like, fuck this shit, I'm out. Unfortunately, I did get to the point where I cannot do it anymore. I can't. And that probably means horrible things about me, but I just don't have it in me. I can't do it. So I remember tearfully telling my dad, who wanted me to be a missionary and a pastor like him at 16 years old, I told him, I can't do it. I'm going to join the military. And he was like, okay, well, God will bring you back around, I'm sure. And, he was supportive. As much as he could be. But yeah, he absolutely did believe. And he was right that I would come back. I did come back, because when you look, Proverbs says, train up a child in the way he should go, and when he's old, he will not depart from it. That is a psychological truth. That speaks to our malleability, right? So we are impressionable, and that's a responsibility on parents. That should scare the shit out of us, and it does me. That if you put something in your kid early, and especially if you reinforce it over and over and over again, it's going to be unbelievably difficult for them to get away from it. And then their condition when they go out, it's like the Amish. They say, I don't know if you know this, with the Amish, they send their year-olds out to their wild oats. They can't go to the clubs, go have sex, go do drugs. And they do. They go absolutely hog wild crazy, like you're saying, Auburn on a Thursday night. That's what they do.
Yeah.
What happens, most of them, the reason that they do is because they're conditioned to. So any bump that they hit in life, which is normal, any setback, they're going to see it. They're programmed to see it as a sign of God's disapproval.
Yes.
And you're not living like you should. You need to go home. You're a prodigal son.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that was me. I went out. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying, like, yeah, that and that in itself is so traumatic. That the way that happens, where they're like, oh, you want to enjoy the real world? Fine, go enjoy the real world, knowing that you are in no way prepared for the real world. Whereas people who grew up secular, or with more introduction to secular, it would be like, whoa, this is a little much. Like, I am not a partier. I've never been a partier. That's just not my vibe. But when you're experiencing it for the first time, all you see is evil around you. Yes. Like that's all that it is. And so of course you go fleeing back home because you don't know any different. And then your whole family's like, see, told you, like, you wanted out so bad, but now you're back.
And then they tell everybody in the circle, see, this is what we told you about. Now let's all give the prodigal a big hug, welcome him home. And we know he's not ever going to go again. And if they don't come back, the few that don't come back, who somehow manage to find their way in the world and keep on going, then they have their cake and eat it too. Then they're like, well, see, they were never really a true Christian and they're going to burn in hell forever. You don't want to be like them, do you? Okay, stay here.
Yep. So like an example is made out of you either way. Mm-hmm. And that's just so manipulative.
Oh, it is.
And toxic. Like,
I will say, talking about my dad and all of that too. And again, I personally look at that very much generationally. And look, he was given what he was given.
Yes.
And he's done a lot of pushing himself, even later in life. I'm really proud of him of continuing to think through things. And he's always been a thinker. My dad never really fit in that circle because he was always a square peg in a round hole.
Yes.
And he's extremely smart. He's a very good person, hates any kind of manipulation, hates any kind of abuse, just a real good person, right? But I'm grateful, I'm not grateful that necessarily that I was given some of the things I was given, but I'm also not bitter about it because I did the same thing to my kids. It just is what it is.
Right.
But he did teach me some incredibly important. He always told me to think for myself, and to be a critical thinker, to analyze everything. And he also taught me a very valuable thing that helped me a lot when I came out, which was, when you don't know the answer, go find wisdom, go read.
Yep.
Yep.
Yes.
And so, but that was my,
yeah. And
that was my cycle. As I left, I came back, and basically, I know you were trying to get to the next one. I'm probably taking up too much time.
No, not at all. Not at all.
So the next one, basically, I came back. I went to seminary. I studied. I did what I was supposed to do. I started out kind of in that typical IFB world, and I won't go into all the details, but ended up getting abused, really, just emotionally and treated really terrible. And it was over and over and over again.
And that was in seminary or after?
In seminary, directly after seminary, right up until I was about 24, 25 years old. And I got to a point, and I say this all the time to people, that conversations like this, I think, are so powerful because people have only so many off-ramps in their life.
100%. I completely agree.
And I can look back in my life and I can see off-ramps I missed, opportunities I had. And I'm not going to kick myself about it. I'm going to move on. But I also know it makes me extremely grateful for the one I did take. And I know that the longer you go, the harder it is. The harder to take that off-road. Yes. And at 24 years old, having seen all the abuse and all the messed up stuff, and my cognitive dissonance was really starting to kick in, seeing the way the church treated homosexuals, seeing the way the church treated women, seeing the way, just so many things. Just grappling with the idea of a conscious eternal torment in hell by a supposedly loving God. I mean, the list goes on and on and on. My subconscious was in revolt against all of this. And I remember I got married very, very young, because that's what you were supposed to do, to a good independent Baptist girl who turned out to not be a good independent Baptist girl. And I told her at the time, I said, hey, I'm done. I'm out. I'm never setting foot in another one of these churches. It's never going to. And she told me, no, absolutely not. This is who we are. This is what we do. And no, we're going to go somewhere else. And I was a coward. And I should have told her, hey, you go wherever you want to go. You do whatever you want to do. But also it's part of the programming. It's part of the programming. To be fair to myself, I did not think divorce was an option.
Right.
I was married to someone, right? And I didn't love her. She didn't love me. We didn't have a good relationship. But we had, according to that world, the right kind of relationship. And,
exactly.
And that was, hey, that's for life.
Yep.
You take that plunge, it's over. It's done. So I'm like, well, I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't, because if I lose my marriage and I get divorced, then I'm an outcast too.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
Especially if I leaving the church and I lose, and that's actually, we'll get there, what actually did end up happening to me about 5 years ago. But I delayed it. I kicked the can down the road because I didn't have the guts at the time. And again, I missed that off ramp.
Yeah.
So that leads me into the second cult.
Quick question. No, I had a quick question about the first one. What is the military like for somebody with such strict moral rules? Because even as a layman, even as a normal, I was raised Baptist, but I'm pretty secular. Like, it seems like a wild ride, even from my perspective. So what's that like for somebody who's supposed to basically avoid everything the military is known for?
It was torture.
I bet.
It was psychological torture. I remember, and I laugh at myself thinking back on it, but I remember boot camp. I remember 17 years old. I had to have my mom sign for me to join, but I knew I had to get out. So I joined the military at 17, got done with boot camp. And I remember the night before Liberty Weekend, when it was done, one of the girls that was in our squadron comes up to me and she's like, hey, Newton, I just want you to know, Liberty Weekend, you're mine. Like we are going to a hotel and it is on. It's going to be all day. She got explicit and I am shriveling up inside.
Literally, I am too.
Mortified. Well, it's the military,
So,
but
if the roles were
that's
reversed,
just how I'm
people would be telling you need to go to prison.
Oh well, yeah, that's another topic. Absolutely,
that's another problem with the military too.
Yeah, there's a strain in the military, especially among women, where they try to emulate the toxic masculinity, and it's not healthy.
Nope.
No, but that's a big thing. It's a big thing there. To women service members, please don't crucify me over that. I'm not saying every one of them.
No, they would probably agree with you. They'd probably be like, yeah, there's a bunch of pick-me's in the military.
Right. Yeah. It's not definitely not all of them, but it's a thing. It's there. But I didn't know how to deal with it at all. I remember literally hiding from her as soon as we were done with passing review because I didn't know what to do.
Wow. That's scary though.
Oh yeah.
That's terrifying.
Yep. I remember practicing in my room alone saying fuck because I was so tired of being mocked.
Yeah.
Being the good little church boy. but I couldn't even get it out of my mouth. I couldn't say words like that because Jesus is watching me.
Yeah. And you truly think that too. Like, it's not, you're like, he's literally watching me. And now, how long were you in the military for? 4 years?
Yeah, just one term.
Yeah. And so I don't know, like, that just seems like it would be such a wild culture shock.
It was, and it's a weird thing too, because it was a precursor to what happened to me 5 years ago. I eventually pretty well got out. I stopped going to church. I started being more or less normal and learning how to negotiate life as a normal person. Lots of ups and downs and challenges with it, but I was making progress. And then found out didn't even completely find out. I got a medical discharge that I did not want, was not looking for. Turns out I ended up having a cardiac issue that they didn't even catch. I had to have surgery on it later, like 25, and whole thing. But I was fainting, I was passing out, and this to me was my escape, right? This was my way out, and I was just starting to get normalized.
Yeah.
And this happens, and this is what I'm talking about. Like, what I thought at that time was, well, this is it. I knew it was coming. God's judging me. I messed up. I tried to stay out too long, but God's telling me it's time to come home. And I was programmed to take it that way. So I went back.
Interesting. And is that when you met your wife and stuff like that? Or were you guys already dating when you went to the military?
No, met her in seminary.
Interesting. So then you went to seminary. So then you got out. So then you got divorced before the second cult came into your life? Or
the divorce is at the end of the last cult.
Interesting.
Yeah, no, but the reason I bring her up is because I met her in seminary, and she was this is a thing within the IFB. Again, the cult within a cult, the world evangelism thing. And my tag on this cult is Jesus loves you, but I actually obey him.
Oh.
And that, yes.
So these are like chapter headlines, like chapter 1, Jesus loves you. That's awesome.
Yeah. So this is Jesus loves you, but I actually obey him. So the Great Commission, you've probably heard of it. Go ye into all the world and preach the gospel, baptizing them in my name, teaching them to observe all things whatsoever I have commanded you. So this is the raison d'etre. This is the reason for living for a Christian, supposedly, according to the Bible. You are left here on earth to evangelize, to save the rest of the world. And most Christians have some concept of that, and they're like, well, we should probably be involved in that somehow. And Southern Baptists, hey, every year I'm going to put some money in the Lottie Moon offering and foreign missions and whatever. And I'm going to be a good witness. I'll tell my friends about Jesus sometimes. And that's about as far as it goes. But this is the group of people that goes, no, this is what Jesus told us to do. And if you look at the book of Acts and you look at all this kind of stuff, this is what the original Christians lived and died for, and were martyred for and murdered for. And who are we to live our comfortable, safe little Christian life in our little bubble when the world's dying and going to hell?
I do also, like, just quick side note, I do think it is interesting when you are deeply involved in a church, you hear all about how many Christians died, but when you're out of it, you hear about how many people we killed.
Right.
So you're like
there's the other side.
Yeah. It's like, we were chased out of England because we believed in God and they made us leave. And then you realize, no, we were the crazy evangelical heretics that England didn't want in their country. So they forced us to leave and we started our own. Right.
And, the Romans killed hundreds of us. Don't ask about the Crusades. That was the Catholics. That wasn't us.
They're not real Christians. Catholics aren't real Christians. We didn't do that.
Exactly. No, we didn't do that. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I always think that's like a funny thing. You're like, wow, I learned about so much more murder when I'm no longer involved in church. Like, wild shit. But
well, that's the great quote from Braveheart, right? History is written by those who have hanged heroes.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. Good impression, by the way. It's one of my favorite movies.
Of course.
So one of the things that I thought was so interesting about the Facebook post that I initially reached out to you over was, and correct me if I'm wrong, this is based on memory, your post was basically saying you might not think you are so vulnerable that you will fall for the same thing multiple times, but in fact you are. Like, just because you have survived once does not mean you are not vulnerable to survive again. And do you feel like that's kind of maybe like a loose summary of your experience in terms of being indoctrinated multiple times and finding yourself having to, I don't want to use the word escape, but also escape multiple times?
No, absolutely. It's cutting down the leaves of grass and hoping that it doesn't come back without yanking out the root. If you don't get down to the root of where does ideology come from, and if that really is the root, and it is, it'll show up in so many different ways. I know so many different ex-Christians too, who I look at and I just go, guys, you're doing it again.
Yes.
You're doing it again. You just found a new thing that you're convinced about and you're identified with. It's the same cycle. And until you get down to the root and you say, I do not need an external locus of identity. I am enough. There's nothing wrong with me. I don't have to do anything to be okay. I don't have to believe anything to be okay. I am okay. And everything else can go to hell.
Literally and figuratively.
Literally and figuratively. Yes. But until you get to that point, it's going to keep cropping up. Absolutely.
And so do you think that feeling of not being enough is what made you, I don't want to say fall victim, but like what made you attractive to another group that then brought you into the fold? Or do you think you were seeking out a group like that? How do you think that worked, if you had to guess?
I think it's a combination. Very good question. It's a combination. It's two poles of a magnet. You know, there's a vacuum inside of me looking for acceptance, looking for belonging, purpose, meaning, forgiveness, all of those kinds of things. And they're looking for the same thing because they're stuck in it as well. And usually there's probably one psychopath at the top of that. And going into the second cult, that's exactly what it was. The literal psychopath was running it. You know, total dark triad personality. Machiavellian, narcissistic. I mean, he absolutely was. But everyone else under it, who's part of the pull and the attraction, they're doing the same thing that I'm doing, and they're well-intentioned, and they're saying, hey, come over here. We're doing it, and we're going to do it right. It's not going to be like it was last time. I promise those things are different here.
It goes back to the abusive relationship dynamic. They come back, and they're like, we're different. We've changed. These are the things we're not going to do anymore. Give us one more chance. So you do. And then you find out.
How many people in abusive relationships even cut the cord with the one person and go right into another one?
Exactly.
And I'll never do what they did to you. I'll never gaslight you. Yeah. So that's what happened. And my ex-wife was a big part of that because she was all about this world evangelism thing. And I had grown up in it as well as a missionary kid. And so I was already programmed for that. I was in seminary to be a foreign missionary, like my dad was before me. And her whole thing was she was not looking for a soulmate. She was looking for someone to let her be a missionary wife, which was a whole thing, you know, and it was attractive to a lot of those, especially young women in those colleges and everything, because it's like a fantasy. It's like I can live in another country and I can learn, I can travel the world and I can do something exciting and everyone's going to congratulate me and tell me what a good person I am. And I'm like a superhero in the Christian world, but they also are living in a very macho chauvinistic thing where they're not allowed to do it on their own. They got to attach themselves to somebody.
Right.
So I was that somebody.
Exactly. And
I was
also,
her meal ticket.
not only that, but if you do happen to, because I feel like so many Christians get married so young, if you do happen to be a little bit poor and can't afford nice things, it's because you are a missionary and you gave it up to serve the Lord, not because you're young kids and you just don't have any money yet. It's like, no, we are sacrificing those things for God.
Yes.
And you're like,
nailed it. You nailed it.
And you're like, girl, it's okay to say you're broke. You're 19. Like, it's fine. Like, it's totally fine. Yeah. Yep.
But yeah, it's again, this whole external locus thing of, I don't have to confront my own shortcomings and failings. And this was a person who I believe absolutely was emotionally abused by her parents and her father, especially, completely, and pushed down and made to feel less and stupid and wasn't going to do anything. And so this was her thought of, hey, I will do this and that will fix everything. And just by being a missionary wife, I'll be okay.
Yes.
And I'll have this great fantasy life doing it. So she was not going to give up on that life when I hit that off ramp. And was, no, we're going to do this. I need this. So we went to a church that had a training center for missions. This guy had been a pastor in Peru for 20 years. And I mean, absolute narcissistic, psychopathic definition of a cult leader. And I always say this, the people that he attracted, you talk about that. What's the attraction? What's the pull? I always say it's easier to evangelize than to apostatize.
Ooh, that needs to be a t-shirt. You got merch?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I need merch. So apostatizing carries, and if you don't know that term, to be an apostate means to abandon the faith, be a traitor to your faith. So to apostatize, you're programmed and grown up with, that's the worst possible thing you can do. You are Judas if you do that. And so what do people do? They double down and say, well, if I can convince someone else to believe it and it changes their life, then it's all real for me too. And then you get the outward positive community reinforcement that everyone's congratulating you. There's nothing bigger as a notch on your belt than I led someone to the Lord. And that's why the seminary that I was at, every year they have something called Soul Winning Marathon. And we'd all get on a bus and go to a little town, and we would door knock for a week and count them. And I remember sitting across the street from another pair, knocking on the door and hearing them say, if you were to die right now, do you know that you would go to heaven? And just cornering this poor old lady and getting her to recite this prayer. Wow. And then she closed the door. They look across the street to us and said, we got another one.
Wow. You know? That's wild.
And that is way easier when you're in the middle of that than to do the shadow work and to go down deep and go, hey, something's wrong. Something's not fulfilling me.
Right. Yeah. And I tell people that I know that are still religious, I say all the time, whenever you decide to deconstruct, whenever you decide that you are leaving and you don't actually believe anymore, it is not what the media portrays. It is not like, hey, like, take that, God and Christians, like, fuck you. No, it's literally like there is a grief and there is a sadness. And you're
dying.
You're dying. You're dying, and you realize that you will never see your loved ones again, like everybody promised. They are not watching you from heaven. And this is just from like the atheist perspective. Like, people don't understand. I'm not quite sure how you identify currently, but I identify as an atheist, and I wish that heaven were a real place. And I would love to see my loved ones again. And I would love to know that at the end of all of this, there is a wonderful, beautiful place for me where I'm going to be my best version, and I'm going to see everyone as their best version, and they are no longer in pain. But that I just simply don't believe.
Right.
And it's sad, and I hate that. But
it's the
right, but I can't sit in a pew and pretend like I don't think that's exactly what is in store for me. Well,
can I jump in on that, because that's such a powerful thought. I grew up hearing all the time, and you probably did as well, and your listeners, I'm sure, that basically when people are confronted with that choice to deconstruct or not, the excuse that you hear a lot is, well, if I'm wrong, what's the worst that can happen? If I die and there's no heaven, I lived a good life. Well, but if I'm right, then hey, I escaped hell. It's like eternal life insurance. But I want to say this, that is so, so, so wrong and harmful. The consequences are so massive to you and your family and the human race. I will never forget the last sermon I ever preached. The last sermon I ever preached was Paul writing to the Corinthians, and he said that if in this life only, I'm trying to remember exactly how it is. It's been too long. If we have Christ in this life only, basically, he said that we are of all men most miserable. And I preached that sermon, and I would preach it again, but with a very different focus. But his point was, no, it's not, just have a good life and be a good person. And if you're wrong, you're wrong. He's saying, no, being a Christian means that you're going to suffer and sacrifice and give up. And he's right.
Yes.
You are.
Yes.
You are. And if you're wrong, you wasted your life. And whatever you believe about the afterlife or don't believe, I don't have a belief. Again, I'm agnostic. I'm open, I think that there's more out there than we can explain, whether that's science or metaphysics or whatever. I don't know. I don't know. But whatever you believe about that, this life is unique. It's unique. You're never going to have this experience again.
Right.
You're never going to have this opportunity. You're never going to be around these people. You're never going to have these chances. And I believe, and I'm sure you'd agree, I think that some atheists go the wrong way and they become nihilists.
Yeah, they are anti-religion as opposed to a-religious,
Their two tenets of belief are God does not exist and I fucking hate him.
Yeah. You're like, that's a lot of hatred for a guy you don't even believe is real. Like, what the fuck?
Right.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be a nihilist. You don't have to be. Life has purpose and meaning, even if you have to use that purpose and meaning.
Right.
But do it, because if you don't and you sit in this prison cell of someone else's making, you're not having a good life.
No.
You're not being your true self. And you are of all men most miserable.
Well, not only that, but if you are living as religion says, and for whatever reason that makes you happy as a clam, you are likely harming other people in order to. So, because people say, well, worst case scenario, if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and then I get to the end and I find out it was all for nothing. They're not taking into account the guilt and the shame that they imparted on their loved ones. Like you can say all you want, like, oh, maybe I was wrong, but what about your gay relative that you never spoke to again because they were gay? Your son that you grounded because you caught him masturbating. Like, what about those people?
What about, your actions have consequences, and it's not just acts of commission, it's acts of omission.
Yeah.
It is a life devoid of all of the things that you could have and should have done for the benefit of everyone around you that you were not able to do because of this box that you put yourself in.
Yes, exactly. So people can say all they want, oops, I was wrong, but like you're
not an island.
The ripple effect of harm in those actions and in those beliefs is like, there's just no way we can even possibly know for sure how many people you impact when you proselytize something that you don't actually believe, but you're doing it just because like you'd rather, like an insurance policy.
You're right. That is such an incredibly selfish thing to do. And the last thing I'll say about that too, before we get like to where you want to go, is I would tell those people, and if you're listening and you're struggling with that cognitive dissonance and you're struggling with that bubbling up of your subconscious telling you that something is not right with this, but you're afraid to even look at the sacred cow, right? Let's talk about it from a biblical perspective. I'm a fan, if you want to say, of the Jesus story. I think that I love mythology.
Yeah.
I have a tattoo of Odin losing his eye on this arm. I have a tattoo of the key road of the oldest symbol of Christianity on this one. I love the story of Horus. I love all of these because I don't believe in. Here's the thing. I think that especially Christians mistake truth and facts a lot. I think that there is such a thing as truth with a capital T, but you're so hung up on factual. Is the Bible factual? No. Is there capital T truth in it that you can pull from and guide you? And it's the voice of your ancestors. And it's stuff that's hung around for hundreds of thousands of years of human evolution. I'm also not that, hey, fuck you, Bible, Jesus. No. Like, if you study the effect of the Bible on Western civilization, it's the cornerstone. And for a reason, not because of the bullshit, but because there is capital T truth in there. And the Jesus story is a fantastic example of that. The most Christ-like thing that you can do is stand up against the world and take on the suffering consciously of being and wrestle with it, even if you're rejected, even if you're killed, even if everyone hates you for it, even if you lose and you die, but you say, I will not buckle under that pressure. I will not be a slave. I will not be someone's puppet. I will find whatever truth is out there, and I will stand for it, no matter what it is, even if it's not what I thought it was. And that's the death and rebirth. So Absolutely. The most Christ-like thing you can do is be willing to die. And we're about to get into the really ugly chapter of my life, which got biblical in its ugliness. But I'm going to tell you, it's the best thing that could have ever happened to me. I'm so grateful for the pain. I'm so grateful for what I'll just say this: the currency that I paid is nothing compared to what I got. It's nothing. I would pay it 1,000,000 times over again.
Yeah. And what would you say that currency was?
It was everything. If you want to double back to Calvinism, that's the last one. I didn't really cover that, but I'll skip forward to answer your question, right? So I went through the Calvinist route. End of the story, I'm in Barcelona. I was there for about 5 years. I learned Spanish. I learned Catalan. I learned the cultures. I started a church from scratch. It's still there. And I was training a young man who was one of my converts to be the next pastor of the church. And I come home one day and my ex-wife tells me, I'm in love with him, not you.
Oh
yeah.
My.
Oh yeah, and the rug is pulled out from under me completely.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I end up losing my marriage for a time. I lost my kids. I lost my career. I lost that church actually excommunicated me officially because my ex-wife, look, and I understand it. I'm not even bitter. I'm not angry, but it's all about that mindset. She was put in a position of, this is what I want. And look, we weren't happy. Okay.
Right.
Neither one of us were happy. And so I have no problem with her saying, hey, I'm done. I'm out. I should have done it earlier, or she should have done it. No problem. But again, you don't feel like you have that choice. And so she hit her breaking point and wanted to be with this guy. And so what are her options? If she's honest about it, then she's the devil. She's the whore. She's the scarlet letter. She literally told me this. She was like, I'm going to be the scarlet letter for the rest of my life. And it's either that or I have to be the devil. And so all kinds of lies and character assassination started happening. And I decided at the time, I said, I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to defend myself. I will not. And if God exists, he'll vindicate me. And if not, I'm not going there. And so I shut up. I didn't say anything. So I got excommunicated from that church. I was a superhero. I was a rock star. I was preaching it. I had preached in 40 some states.
Did they think that you had cheated on her, or like what was it that they thought had happened that gave her grace?
That was the story. The story was that I was what's the word in English? I'm thinking in Spanish. Philanderer. I had done this and I had done that. None of it was true.
Right.
And the people who were really close to me, that was what really hurt. I thought, okay, they'll at least reach out. They'll reach out and be like, hey, this doesn't sound like you. We know you. What's going on there? Didn't happen. Everybody just bought it hook, line, and sinker. And so, but again, I'm so grateful it happened, because that was a wake-up call for me. I went, okay, all of this was an illusion. I don't have meaningful relationships. I don't have friendships. I'm a tool. I'm a puppet. They're happy to have me as a rock star and preach in front of their 5,000 person congregation and put my videos on their website and write blogs for them and collaborate on books. And they'll as long as I'm serving my function to their system, I'm useful, but I'm a useful idiot. And that's what I was. And I again, death. It was a death to realize I'm a useful idiot. But that opened the door. It opened the door for me to say, okay, I've lost everything, absolutely everything. I've got nothing left to lose. So I might as well just get honest. I might as well get real, because that's what I've been afraid of. Was I knew that something like that would happen if I ever really turned inward and honestly looked at those things. And thank God, the universe, chance, fortune, whatever you want to say, I'm just grateful that that choice was made for me.
Absolutely.
Because I don't think I would have had the strength to do it.
Absolutely. I think I definitely agree with that. I think especially in my own life, the hardest decisions I've ever had to make, like you said, were made for me. They were taken out from under me, and I had to figure out like how to survive without those things that were such a part of my identity. So I think you're right. I think a lot of times, it's in a world where, cancel culture is running rampant. I do think that but I do think there is an opportunity for that to actually be the best thing that's ever happened to you.
I agree.
You personally, you as in the general, the general you, all of us, but
y'all.
Exactly. And I think that what you mentioned there is like a really powerful message, because we can either take what people do to us and what people take from us, and we could spend the rest of our lives trying to undo that, or trying to prove that we're not what they say we are, or trying to, no, they were wrong, that didn't happen, that's not blah, 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 blah. Or we can be like, what is this new version of myself like without that? What's does that look like?
And that was exactly what I did. Unknowingly, I did the best thing I could do. I had to come back to the States. I was alone. I was living in a little basement room. I was struggling to find a job. I didn't know what I was going to do with my career. I'd spent my whole life doing this. I lost everything. And that's what I did. I would sit in bed and go, okay, what does the real Scott look like? Okay, number one, he's not over 300 pounds, so he's going to get his fat ass in the gym.
Yeah.
And I started there, and that helped. And
were you really over 300 pounds?
Oh, I was massive, yeah.
Really? I would not have guessed. Wow.
Oh, yeah. It was, well, fortunately, that the greatest blessing that I ever got in exchange for what I paid was the love of my life. My wife is, she is unbelievable. I'll just say it that way. She's unbelievable. Sorry.
No.
And I'm very, very grateful to have found her. And hey, one of the perks was not only is she awesome and gorgeous and fun, but she was also a personal trainer.
No, there you go.
So, yep. I didn't know I was a flip at the time, but apparently I was a fixer-upper.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
So then, is she religious? Like, what is her background? How did you guys meet?
Catholic background. She's from Argentina. So most people there culturally, historically Catholic, but not super hardcore Catholic, just kind of culturally Catholic. So she's got, some of her little hangups that she's had to work through, but I don't think anywhere near as massive on the religious side as mine. She's got her own things from life that she's had to really struggle with, and boy, has she. She's a fighter. She came from nothing, dirt floors and no dad and just rough situation, and pulled herself up by her bootstraps like you would not believe. She's the American dream story. And now she's a successful real estate agent and entrepreneur and property investor, and just amazing.
That's awesome.
We met January 1st, New Year's Eve party in 2019 at the Omni Hotel. It was an international gala. And I went there in the middle of all that. And this was 6 months removed from all that happening, and trying to find the new Scott, and I didn't want to go. I was down. I was depressed, but I was like, you know what? No, I won't do this. I'm going to go out and I'm going to have fun. I had no idea I was going to, meet the love of my life, but I just wasn't going to sit and have a pity party. So I put on a nice suit and I went out, and I remember it was midnight, the balloons dropped. And in that moment, it was like a knife in my heart. I was just, I'm here and I'm alone and I've been having fun, but now it's all crashing home. And in that moment, I feel a hand on my arm, and I look over, and it's her. This beautiful, gorgeous woman is looking at me and saying, "Hey, are you here by yourself?" And then I wasn't alone.
Yeah.
And we had a blast, danced the night away. I call her my reverse Cinderella, because she showed up, at 12:01.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Reverse Cinderella. That's good.
But the whole point is, like, it's worth it. It's worth it. It will cost everything that you hold dear, but then you'll find out that the things that you hold dear weren't that valuable.
Right.
And there's so much more out there.
The things that you think you hold dear might not be the dearest that you can hold something, but you'll never know until you find what else is out there. 100%. So if you could pick a lesson that you learned from each of the 3 cults, we'll say, that you were a part of, that you maybe still carry with you, or that you learned a lot from, what would those lessons be, do you think?
Wow. Well, let me do this, if it's okay. Let me give you a 30-second synopsis of the last one, just so we don't leave it hanging. And I do that, I'll be thinking about those lessons.
Yeah, and you can make your synopsis longer than 30 seconds. That's so bad.
Okay, so the third one was Calvinism. And for those of you unfamiliar with Calvinism, that follows what are called the doctrines of grace, one of the biggest misnomers in the history of humankind. Are you familiar with Calvinism?
I am, but I want to hear it from the mouth of somebody who was involved.
Okay, so it's the acronym is TULIP. So total depravity, unconditional election, limited atonement, irresistible grace, and perseverance of the saints. So I'll break those down for you real quick. Total depravity, we talked a lot about that. You suck. You suck as hard as you could possibly suck. And God hates you because you suck. And my tagline for this one is, Jesus may or may not love you, and you definitely hate him. That's Calvinism.
That's hilarious.
So, yeah, you are horribly depraved, massively depraved, and you are inclined to sin and only sin, and you are just the worst. So that's total depravity. And not only do you not do what's right, but you hate what is right. And unless God actually regenerates you and makes you born again all by himself without your choice or your involvement, you're so depraved that you would never even choose to accept his gift of grace if he offered it to you. That's how fucking bad you are.
Jeez.
Oh yeah.
It's almost like a kink kind of, where you're just like punished and punished and punished and just keep coming back.
It's incredibly masochistic.
Yeah.
And not in
Wow.
fun.
So how did that one end up being the last one that you were in? I feel like usually
Yes.
people start with the really,
Right.
really intense ones and trickle down from there.
Well, that's a fantastic question, because I wanted to get to that. Where does the progression come from? It comes from, I was given a seed of the Bible, inerrant, infallible, inspired, plenary. It is there. You cannot question the Bible. And that is the track that led me down the road. And the last station on there, and this is not just for me, it's for so many people, the last station is Calvinism, because Calvinism is exactly what the Bible teaches if you take it literally. It absolutely is.
It is the most literalist religion I've ever heard of in my whole life.
So I'll say this, if you think you believe the Bible and you're not a Calvinist, look, this was my entire life for 20 years. Yeah, that's Calvinism is the Bible. End of story. If you're going to take it literally. And people fight that like crazy for good reason, because it really, really is ugly.
It
and
is.
They hate it, and they have an emotional reaction to it, and they should. But that should cause some cognitive dissonance where you go, okay, maybe this book isn't exactly what I thought it was, right? But that's not what, people want to have their cake and eat it too. So anyway, TULIP, total depravity. Unconditional election. Again, because you're so depraved, the only way that you're ever going to be, one of God's little lambs is if he, without any condition, without any choice on your part, just chooses before the foundation of the world that you're going to belong to him, and he's going to make it happen. So that's unconditional election. And then the flip side of that is, if you're not chosen for heaven, you're chosen for hell. And they'll play word games with that. And no, see, reprobation, which is what they call it, reprobation is passive. It's not active. So God doesn't actively choose you to go to hell. He just actively tells you to go fuck yourself.
I really want to hear that verse in the Bible. And on the seventh day, the Lord saith, go fuck thyself. And he saw that this was good.
And God rested and dropped the mic.
Yep.
Right. So that's unconditional election. Limited atonement is Jesus died for the people he likes and not for anybody else. Jesus did not die for your sins.
Jesus died for everyone but Sharon.
But Sharon!
We see you, Sharon. Fuck you, Sharon.
Even Jesus thinks you're a bitch, Sharon.
Yeah, God died for everyone except you, Kevin. Fuck
we
off.
saw you double dip. We know. Yes, and Jesus saw it. So limited atonement, irresistible.
And so did all your dead relatives in heaven. They all saw it too.
Right. Yes. Irresistible grace. You cannot resist. God will make you his whether you like it or not. But don't worry, you'll end up liking it.
Oh, Jesus, I've heard that before, but
right,
not in the religious sense.
God's gonna tie you up and have his way with you, but don't worry, you're gonna enjoy it.
You're gonna love it.
Nothing creepy going on there. Right. And then the last one is perseverance of the saints, which is what we've talked about a little bit too, that if God has done all of this spiritual rape, then you will never be able to leave. So,
and as someone who was already convinced that they didn't have what it took to succeed in the first cult or the first sect, what was it about this one that you were like, maybe let's try it out? Was it just for your wife, or was it? No,
it wasn't even so much about succeeding, because I guess you could say to a certain extent, I succeeded. I made it in those other ones. I was in leadership positions and supposedly doing well. But again, it's just following it's sunk cost fallacy, right? So it's throwing good money after bad. It's like I've been digging my whole life in this pit of the Bible, being told that this is the gold. And again, I've already said there is gold there, but it's not the gold that you're looking for. Right. But in this pit of literalism, that the Bible has to be all of these different things, and it will bring you grace and joy and peace and love and all these kinds of things. Well, it's not doing that. So I better study harder. I better dig down deeper. And then when you do that, you come across Calvinism, because that's the Bible. You go, oh shit, the Bible's actually saying this. So, okay. And I always say that, Calvinism is IFB with book learning.
Well, yeah. And like for anybody listening who might not be familiar, the way that I feel like I can kind of describe the levels we're talking about here is Baptist. It's like, this is the Bible, but like, he didn't actually mean like the bad stuff. That's metaphorical. But he did mean the anti-gay stuff. That's not metaphorical. And then there's IFB, which is like, good luck trying to ever make up for what it was you did. We want you to try, but we're telling you right now, there's like, that's not going to happen for you most likely, but try, but do it, and try to get as many people involved as you can. And then I feel like with evangelicals, like what I imagine is similar with the worldwide, worldwide evangelism is like, we're here to collect points. We aren't, none of us are ever going to be perfect at it, except the person in charge. The guy in charge, he is perfect at it. We need to do what he says all the time. We're going to just keep collecting people without figuring out the right way to do it yet, without figuring out how any of us are going to be perfect at it yet. We're just going to keep adding to our collection, because at least that'll make us look better in the eyes of God. And then Calvinism is, there's literally nothing you can do to make yourself look not like a piece of shit. So don't even try. But also, if you don't try, you're going to be tortured for eternity. So
sucks to be you.
Yeah, those are like the levels we're talking about.
And by the way, everything is preordained. Absolutely.
Yeah, by the way, God already decided that you're not going to make it, but you still have to live out your life wondering if you're going to make it.
But don't worry, you've at least got eternal torment to look forward to.
But don't worry, at least you're not a Baptist, so. At least you're not one of those.
Well, there are Calvinist Baptists.
Oh, I know. Oh, yeah, I know.
I was one of them.
Yeah.
Yep. Reformed Baptist.
So like boomer Calvinist Baptists are the scariest people I've ever met in my life.
Oh, yes.
Scariest people I've ever met in my life.
Oh, yes. Just, you want to trigger any of them? Just ask them about Servetus. They will lose their shit.
I feel like boomer Calvinist Baptists and like older than that, like whatever generation comes before that, are the kind of people that I like would fear would like cut me open and take my baby to make it a purer Christian than I was. Like
they're like they would be good stars in The Handmaid's Tale. Like they would, they could be like, I could see this. Okay,
yeah, like work. Even at my most like devout Christian, I thought Calvinists were wild and crazy and scary people. Yep.
So I used to be one of them. So hopefully there's a little bit of hope.
Yeah.
But again, the reason I got there was because I was desperately digging to be, I knew I had to be in line with the Bible, because that was the only hope that I had. And it led me to a place that destroyed my soul. I hated being a Calvinist. I hated it. It's a horrible, horrible thing. Like if you think IFB is bad, you're a sinner going to hell for someone else's fruit thievery, and God knew all about it beforehand, but still decided to do it this way. Well, how about God not only knew about it, but decided it all beforehand without consulting you? It's just evil. It's just evil. And
it's like torture shit, literally.
Yeah. You want to say that's God and not your idea of Satan? Dude.
Yeah. 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 Like I listen to a lot of serial killer documentaries and stuff. And like the tapes the serial killers make aren't that far off from some of the lessons I've read in Calvinism.
Oh yeah. Predeterminism. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It leads you to a pretty nihilistic view too. It's like, everything's going to happen exactly the way it's going to happen. Even my own sin is preordained and part of God's plan. And so whatever I do, well, hey, I mean, and that's the scary part, is when psychopaths get a hold of Calvinism. Ooh, boy.
Yep.
Ooh.
Yep.
I have an excuse for everything that I do, and nothing that I do can ever separate me from God. And I mean, that's the Crusaders screaming Deus Vult as they charge into people and slice them open because God wills it. It gets dark.
Yeah. And what's interesting to me is these very strict, very cruel, often religions. And I want to be clear. Earlier when I said when I talked about abuse and manipulation, and right now when I'm talking about cruelty, I'm not talking about people who are in those religions. I'm talking about the religion themselves, because I truly consider the people within them to be victims. But these cruel, manipulative, abusive messages are the same people who think that radical Islamic individuals are out of this world and evil. And I'm like, do you not hear your message? So, just because our radicals don't blow people up with bombs, no, we're insidious in a mental, institutional, and biological way, like where we can look at them and we can be like, oh, well, I would never blow up people in the name of Allah. No, instead I would literally rather indoctrinate generations of innocent people to thinking that they are so horrible and sinful and disgusting that they're lucky even human beings are willing to love them, let alone their God. And you're like, right, Jesus. It's kind of like how we still see physical effects from things like the atomic bomb, how people still are, they're having.
I have scars. I have a lot of scars.
Yep.
And thank God a lot of them heal, but boy, does it take a lot of shadow work.
Right. And even the ones that heal aren't gone, like even as somebody who considers myself pretty staunchly atheist, like I don't hate religious people or anything, but I don't believe any of it.
Except Karen.
Yeah, except Karen. But the effects of faith and the effects of organized religion can still harm you from a distance. There are still nights where I lay awake and I wonder if I am wrong, and if all of this is real, have I damned myself to an eternal hell? And literally the only thing that keeps me from spiraling in those moments, usually when I'm high, is the fact that I know that I'm saved, that I got saved when I was a kid, and that hopefully if all of this was for nothing, at least God would say, well, you got saved. Like, you're stained and you've got marks and you've got dings, but you beat the system. You got saved when you were 9.
And you're going to be in a single wide trailer in heaven, but at least you're there.
Yeah. I'm going to be in a single wide trailer no matter what. I told you where I come from. I told you about my people.
And we're funny. We're the opposite. Like, when you're high, you get scared. I'll be honest with you. Wow. Marijuana was one of the biggest things to help me come out. For the first time, when I was right before all of that bomb went off, I started trying marijuana for the first time. And it was, at first it was as an escape, but I don't get weird or goofy. I get introspective. I get clear.
Yeah.
And I started getting, and then I could almost physically see my subconscious versus this created ego, and I could almost physically sense it bubbling up to the surface. I remember thinking the first time that I smoked weed about the movie Inception. Inception. And so the dream within a dream within a dream. And the thing that really hit me was the line of the guy diving down to get him right at the very bottom. And he tells him, come back with me and we can be young men together. And I was like, that's me. I'm at the bottom of this pit. I've gone as far down as I can go, and I'm old and I'm withered and I'm dead. And it's myself, my own self is diving down here and telling me, hey, come up. You don't have to live down there.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And so I'm all about some medicinal herb and psychedelics and things like that.
Shrooms are what did it for me. Shrooms.
You talk about healing.
Yes. So
that is a ritual for me and my wife.
Yeah. So what happened with me was I'd been smoking weed for a couple of years, maybe like 3 years at this point. I was probably 25, 26, and I tried shrooms for the first time. And I don't know about you, but whenever I smoke weed and I have questions and I write them down, the next day I'm like, these are the dumbest questions I've ever read in my entire life. But when I was on shrooms, the questions were really good questions.
Yeah.
And I think what it was they were questions I had always secretly had, but I'd been too afraid to allow to surface. And
Right.
psychedelics kind of don't give you a choice whether or not that stuff surfaces.
It's all coming up.
And I tell people all the time, before I took those shrooms, I was a conservative Republican Baptist woman. Wow. And the next morning I woke up a liberal Democrat atheist because all of the beliefs that I thought I had, my brain was like, what about this? What about this? But what about this? But what about this? But what about this? And I couldn't justify those questions.
There's no hiding from cognitive dissonance.
There's no hiding. There's no hiding. And I tell people all the time, I'm like, shrooms obviously aren't for everybody, but very similar to yours.
Yes, they are.
Yeah, you're like, yes, they are. But in a very similar way that you described your journey earlier, I am so grateful every single day for that experience. And I genuinely get emotional when I think of who I could possibly be now had I not had that experience. And literally, I was one shroom trip away from being a totally different human being and having a totally different brain. And I fear for that alternate universe where I'm still that person who never had that experience and is still indoctrinated and questioning and embarrassed and probably married to somebody in the Baptist church because that's what you do. And it's just, I don't know. It's scary when you think about how close you could have come to not being free.
Yes, it is. And that's why I'm saying those off ramps are so few and those moments are so important. And so if you're listening to stuff like this and you're in one, that your subconscious is doing that. I mean, this has eternal consequences. And I mean that in the sense of the ripple effect, like you said. This will affect you and the future generations and everyone around you. And you need to listen to Sydney's main point, which I think was we should lace all of the water supplies with LSD. I think that was a call to action, right? No, I'm just kidding. We'll edit that one out.
The opinions expressed by the guests on this podcast. I know that I've taken 2 hours of your time when I said I would only take one, and I am so grateful for the conversation that we've had. I already know that I want to get you on another episode to talk more in depth about some of these details. But in conclusion of this segment of this episode, what would you say to somebody who maybe has grown up very strictly religious and has questions, or maybe they still think they're religious, but they're worried they're not living the way they should be? What would you say to somebody who's confused and hurting right now?
So much I would want to say, but I think the number one thing I would say is, first of all, reject the impulse to take any of this personally. No one's mocking you. No one is mocking you. I'll mock myself to my dying day, but I would never mock you. And it is an impulse to take things personally and to associate your thoughts and your beliefs with yourself and your identity. They're two different things. We let our ideas die so that we don't die. That's how humans work. So that's first and foremost. And I say this with complete honesty. I love you. I really do. And anything that I say about this, I genuinely, like I said, I'm a believing agnostic. I don't know where my prayers go, but before this podcast, I was praying. I really was. God, universe, whatever, use this, please, to help somebody. No one's mocking you. No one's coming after you. No one's saying that you're stupid. You're not. There's nothing wrong with you. And the only thing that you could say is wrong with you is that you think that there's something wrong with you. And that's not your fault. Yeah. Someone put that on you. And the other thing I'd say is this: truth is not intimidated by error. So do not allow yourself one single sacred cow in life. Everything has got to be on the line. It's all open. So, and that's a very hard thing to do because we have those neural pathways, but recognize it. Hey, 95% of my perspective and experience is programming. So is mine. So is Sydney's. Everyone's is that way. The only thing that we can do is recognize that fact and do our best to take a step back from it. Meditation is fantastic for doing that. Take a step back from it. And the best that you can do, look, I'm open to whatever I hold being wrong. And not just wrong in a negative sense. Look at it in a positive sense, that I may be missing something good. I may be missing out on, and it's just right there, and I can have it. I can get it. I don't feel fulfilled down deep. I don't feel right. I don't feel in balance, and I can get there. I can absolutely get there. And the answer is not dig down deep even further into what got you here. What got you here is not going to get you out. You have to get you out.
Yes.
That's 100%. What I would say.
100%. That's such a powerful message. And I think that's the kind of message that people need to hear, but they also have to learn on their own as well in order to really make it stick. And I honestly, the only thing I would add to that is that if they're going to approach this part of their life, like religion, with exactly the fervor and the determination that you just mentioned, the only thing I would say is that when you are leaving something like a religion, it makes you vulnerable to other groups that operate similar to a religion. So while you're deconstructing or thinking about it, like while you're doing research, don't let a political party, don't let a club, don't let a group, don't let a family, don't let a town or a school board, don't let any other groups get you without approaching it with the exact same research, thought, consideration, determination, no matter what. It can be what daycare you want to put your kid in. And just always trust your gut first. Trust your own research first, trust your thoughts and feelings first. And if anything seems amiss, or if at any point you feel pressured or controlled, get out.
And to that point, yes, undemonize your own conscience.
Yep.
You've been taught that voice is the voice of doubt and fear. It's not. It's a voice. It is the voice that you can trust, and you have to learn to identify your own voice.
Right.
And I can't remember who said the quote, but it's a good one. The root of all of man's problems is the inability to sit in a room alone with himself.
Yes.
So when you're going through this, guess what? That is a solitary journey. And it helps. It literally does help. This is a reason why, as a part of so many religious practices and spiritual practices, there's the concept of the pilgrimage or the walkabout, or what. Take time for yourself, to be by yourself and with yourself, and learn to listen to your own voice. 100%.
100%. Yep. Well, thank you so much for your time today and your stories and your opinions. I'm going to call this part 1. Like, okay. I'm not forcing you to do a part 2, but I'm pressuring you to do a part 2.
Okay, this was fun, and my internal conscience says yes, so you're fine.
Yeah, I was going to say, you did research, you can decide on your own. I'm hoping you'll do a part 2, but this is really enlightening. This is very useful, and I want you to know that just based on the feedback that I get from people who listen to this podcast, I know for a fact your words and your experiences will help a lot of people.
I hope so.
I know they will.
Unity.
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, but I'll even send you the statistics on how your episode does. I'll even send you the stats to let you know how many people.
I tanked your podcast and I have proof.
Yeah. But Yeah, thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate that you gave me a whole other hour than what I told you were going to, and I would love to get our calendars together and have you on again, because there's a million questions and details that I still want to get from you, but I definitely think that your message and your voice and your lesson will help a lot of people. So thank you so much for that as well, for your service both in the military and also for your service here with your life experiences.
Thanks, Sydney. It's been fun.
Yeah, no problem. Well, have a great day, and I will be hitting you up as soon as I hang up here for whatever date works best for you.
All right, we'll talk soon.
All right, talk soon. Bye.